Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I have something that has been a big success before, and this is the latest version of it. And I'll show it to you using this piece of music, such as it is. Up, but I'm not going to do it quite like that. Here's what we're going to do. Didn't quite work the way I expected it. Like this. This is a demonstration of Airwindows Console 3. And Console 3 is the latest version. It's the most sophisticated version of Console yet. As you can plainly see, this is a console that has a gain trim on it. And it's a gain trim that doesn't have dB markings. It's like the lower trim in the purest gain control, because this should be done by ear. This shouldn't be done by calculating out dB values or whatever. It should be left at unity gain wherever possible. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to demonstrate what this sounds like, and then I'm going to cut to the same thing with console kicked in. The idea of making it all mono is that console works in depth. It ought to also help stereo positioning and stuff like that, but console is really about working on depth. So we'll go from this to bring in console. Now let's just take that away again. Now what you have without console, what you have without console is a typical digital mix. I have no less than 3 different acoustic guitars, 6 different acoustic guitars. I have so many I've lost track of how many acoustic guitars I have playing the same thing. I've got a bass, I've got a Farfisa organ with a fake Leslie buried in the mix, and I have a drum kit that's recorded with 2 overheads and nothing else. I've got the Freebie Smooth doing a bunch of things, and I have the plugin Logical 3 doing a variety of things. And those are just part of the mix that I've got in here. Oh, also a C-Strip 2 doing some tone control. I mean, I can demonstrate what that is about. C-Strip 2 is doing this. It's taking some of the mids out, like this. And Logical is bringing up the gain a lot. Without Logical, you've got this. But what you get when you bring console into the mix, and again, everything is panned to the center here so that you can hear depth, is that things will blend in such a way that there's more depth and dimensionality and space around things. Pardon me for fumbling my explanation of it. This is actually the first time I've ever explained console on YouTube. So what we do is we go from this to this. Hear a big change in the texture of the acoustic guitars. There's also a reverb in here. You can hear a separation on the reverb. And even the drums are coming across differently. And again, we'll take it back out again. this is a much more flat presentation. But I'm sure you don't want to just only hear that. Now that I've made my point, we'll quickly adjust this to a suitable position, and now you can hear what it sounds like in stereo. This is also a good way to do the demo of the apply to everything at once. Console 3 is these two plugins that work in conjunction with each other. It is Console 3 Channel and Console 3 Bus. Now here's the explaining part that this might take a little bit longer, but hopefully it will be well worth it. And people often want to know how Console works. Hopefully in listening to it, you can hear how it does something and is a useful effect. It's not simply a saturation effect or a coloring effect. In fact, it tries to not color the sound at all. But one thing that's always been rather tricky is explaining how it works and how you do certain things with it. Console works through placing the channel plugin on all of the independent channels, all of the sound sources, and the bus on the output. I've got 80 clip on here just as a safety clipper because the mix is running slightly hot so that it can go onto YouTube and be exciting to people and stuff. Now, when I talk about how Console works, I talk about stuff being inside or outside of Console. What we've got here is all of this stuff being outside of Console, but things can also be inside of Console. I'll demonstrate that now with the drum kit, I think. We'll turn these on. Let's crank the wideness up just for the heck of it. Here's our drums. And you'll notice that we also have a EQ and the compressor. Let's see what happens when we put the EQ inside Console. There's a slight change in where things are placed. I'll put it back. Console will tend to expand the sound of anything that is going on in it. I can even do another example. For instance, we'll take out C-strip here. I can always copy it from the other one. I don't suppose I really need to demonstrate all this again. And I can't use space, but I can use pocket verbs. We'll put on a reverb, and just for fun, let's get rid of logical. Now, what we've got is something much like this. This is the chamber setting. Now, if I change this over so that pocket verb is inside Console, actually it'd probably just as well to throw logical back on so that it's louder. There we go. If we put pocket verb inside Console, it will change the texture of it because pocket verb is basically like your basic reverb. It's many different delays and comb filters and things combined together. That's all a lot of processing. But processing can happen inside inside Console. And what Console does with mathematical operations like that is it kind of expands them outwards. It takes whatever is going on in the summing of things and does stuff to the summed components of it while trying to leave the original sounds alone. And I'll show you what it does. And there it is. Now that is a somewhat different texture. I'll put it back. You can hear that there's slightly more opaqueness in it under this circumstance. It is a little thicker, and the reverb is sitting at more like the same level. Putting it inside console, we'll try to put the reverb back farther. We'll do it again. And that gives us a little bit more spatiality in there. But that's not the only thing that you can do. We can also whip out Logic's regular old channel EQ. Just like this. Now here's the thing that I was demonstrating with bus colors. Bus colors has the capacity of working with pocket verb in such a way it'll probably be a little bit more lively working with Console3. And console is what bus colors works with. It was designed to work with consoles 1 and 2, but Console3 has a little bit more liveliness on the bus plugin. However, that should work pretty well for what we're doing here. Namely, I'll goose this up high, and let's start putting in a nice sharp little thing. This is going to be an obvious sort of effect. There, that's an interesting and obnoxious sound. Maybe it's a little too loud, but let's see what happens. This is a little artificial, right? It's 24 dB. Now, if I take this EQ and put it inside console, first of all, I have to go and find it again. But then, notice how I'm getting the same effect at much less gain? And it's much more radical when you do push it in. This is the thing that has to do with how people react to analog versus digital EQs. I'll put it back again. And I'll explain this a little bit. One thing that is said about digital versus analog EQs is that you tend to have to put on more effect with the digital EQ. That's not necessarily the case when you use it inside console. If you run something like a stock normal EQ cookbook style digital EQ like the channel EQ here, which has useful things in it like its analyzer, you can do things like, for instance, let's yank this down somewhere else. I'm going to find an aspect in the sound, perhaps on the snare, with this band of the EQ. It's still a very tight little band. You can get away with a lot more with broader bands, but tight bands are really where it's going to show the unnaturalness of the digital EQ. And so this is what we're going to use to highlight what console can do with something like this. And we'll go searching for it now. Hook that up there. If I sit it right there, it's not really on top of the cymbals too much. There, that's a little boost at 1.5K. It's actually such a tight boost that I'm going to pull it back just a hair. And that's bringing out the snare drum, and so it's not good sounding, but it's the sort of thing one might do if you were trying to bring out stuff in between where the cymbal is. But listen to what happens when we find it also inside console. You can see that's 21.5 dB. That's so much I'll even pull it back a hair. That's 20 dB. Now let's put it inside console, after first pulling it right down again. Now it's inside console. In fact, let's just demonstrate this with some okay, there we are. Now, which one is which? I can probably tell just by listening. This will show you what this does. And this one is outside console, and this one is inside. This is the one that's not in console, and you got to give it a little bit more. We gave it 20, in fact. And this one's inside console. We can give it a little bit more, but this is giving me much the same effect with 4 dB less boost. Actually, we'll call it 3 dB. While we're at it, let's fool around with the frequency range and find a different place. After first turning it on. It's always good to turn it on. Yeah, that's pretty good. So here we have a boost to the ride cymbal. You can hear the top coming off there. And that is before going into console. That's outside of console. And this is what it's like inside a console at lower boost. That's 3 dB less boost, but it's giving the same effect. This is what console can do when using stuff inside it. And I'll go back again. That's possibly slightly more than that. It might not be as much as 3 whole dB, but listen to what it's like when we've got just exactly the same setting. You're getting more action out of it with console. Without. With. And lastly, let's play in the bass too. Let's boost it all the way. Hertz is too low though. 41 hertz is not bad. Yeah, let's go back. .5 seems good. So now what I will do is go to 41.5 inside console. This is at plane. Here's the boost in console. Well, here's the boost outside console. Now check out what the boost is in console. That low end is swinging forwards better. And while I'm at it, why don't I just go the whole hog and... it's not the right one. Lovely wide boost. So here is lovely wide boost outside of console with the ordinary channel EQ. Here it is inside console. The whole texture of that guy is different. Outside console. It's not really connecting with the lows as well. Inside console. There you have it. So you can use console as part of the processing chain. Rather than just summing, certain things can also be put inside it. And when I talk about stuff being processed inside console, that's what I'm talking about. Now there's one final thing that I have to cover as far as going over this stuff, and that is AUXes and mixing. So what we'll do is we'll create an AUX this way. Opening the bus like that is automatically going to give me it. And since that is a... oh, actually it's not a stereo thing yet. Now it's a stereo thing. Since it's a stereo thing, I can pull out my space plugin, which I'm very fond of. If I look for it properly, there we are. And then if I turn this stuff off and maybe put these more or less back, and also I was going to drag C-strip back over there. There. Now we have our noisy little music again. Here's what we can do with the reverb. And I'll also point out, you can still use faders even though they are being done inside console. Console's really designed to be done in such a way where, like for instance, with the C-strip, if you were to use the output gain on it, that would be applying the gain before you actually hit console, and that's where it really would like to be. Console channel would prefer to be post-fader. Logic can't do that just yet, but you can still use the faders. What's going to happen is it will behave as if the channel is slightly hotter and more distorted. It'll throw off the calibration of how console does what it does. So what you're hearing right now is basically everything being mixed in such a way where all the channels are a little bit more distorted than they're supposed to be. And it makes stuff sound a little small and distant. But if we put it back, and then for instance, Oh, it would help if I assigned, don't mind me, bit of a derp there, what we call a derp. It's assigned to bus 2, I'm not quite sure why, but here we are. Now let's put this back, and this is, and we're at 48K, so I will use its default. This is space. Now the thing about this, and I can demonstrate it by switching console out again. We give this a little bit more just to sort of exaggerate it. Is that see, we'll remove it all. If you're running an AUX, then you're probably running it inside of, not necessarily, but you're probably running it inside of console. We can see that these sends are post-fader sends. Post-fader means that you've already gone through the, I'm pointing at C-strip. Console is supposed to be here. You've already gone through console. In fact, there is no option for using a send that doesn't go through whatever is in the plugins, hence console. You can do post-pan, you can do post-fader, you can do pre-fader. It's not going to make a bit of difference. In fact, let's make everything be post-pan just for fun. Because space does react to that kind of stuff. What we get is anything in an AUX is going to apply whatever was on the channels. So AUXs in console mixes are best used for combining stuff. For instance, we can make an AUX where all of the guitars, for instance, are added to a separate channel. Let's do that. Or let's try to do that. There we go. Every single one on bus 2. And then we'll make another bus. The AUX will be bus 2, and it will go to our stereo output. And it's going to be in stereo. And when we do this, we're going to have exactly the same thing as we had before, except for we have independent level control in the faders for all the guitars. We can even throw the reverb send on the guitar separately and have that too be post-panned. And what we've got is all of our guitars. But this is happening inside console because it's happening after the channel processing. So in order to do these buses and submixes, in order to do stuff like this, no guitars, then there they are again, or boosting them. What you've got to do is put console on the individual sources, and we'll do that now. And you don't have to put it on twice. You only have to put it on once. So now we've got console channel and everything that's feeding an AUX, and everything is going into the reverb, and the reverb is being applied inside console. I've already demonstrated what that's like. And then the submix is also being done inside Console. It can have its own reverb send. And I can adjust the gain here, but the gain adjustment that I'm doing is not in front of Console, it's after it. Now there's one exception. You can also do this. And that's not what I meant to do. Off with you. Off with you. And one instance of console channel right here. If you do that there, then you can adjust this gain instead of the fader. And this is actually a smoothed gain. It doesn't react instantly, like I'll demonstrate. Got a little funny something going on there. Not quite sure what that is. Workstations can be funny. But you don't necessarily want to do this because this is different from applying all of the guitars in their own thing. And I'll illustrate that by letting it continue to be in stereo. But we'll go back and forth between everything applied just on the bus and everything applied. Always forget to hold down Option for doing that, versus actually using Console on the thing. We have a little more space in there. In fact, I can probably... Actually, no, I don't think I... No, I can't actually shut them off. I can remove them all at once, but I can't shut them off all at once. So what we've got here, if we decide not to apply Console on the stem and apply it in the individual place, is a submix, where you can nudge things like the verb is fine. You can do anything you want with the verb send. But you can also nudge this fader and adjust the subgroup in various ways inside Console, which is manipulating the way that it works in such a way where if you pull it back, the sound is going to get smaller, perhaps a little faster than you would expect it. And if you push it forwards, the sound is going to get a little more punchy than you necessarily expect. It's operating within the way Console works, and it'll get a little spikier and weirder. So I'll demonstrate that now. Here's our guitars. They sound like this. I'll pull it back. And it drops way back. And then if I push it forward, it's just like with applying the EQ. I get a lot more action out of it doing it this way. Console will magnify the stuff that you do inside it, basically, in addition to increasing the space and definition of everything. That was only 1.8 dB, but the guitars just jumped right out. And you can exploit that. You can exploit that in the mix and use the faders on purpose. It's just not the kind of thing where you necessarily want to use it for big sweeping fader moves, but if you're doing small adjustments and your intention is making the small adjustments cause instruments to jump out or sit back, then it can be perfectly fine to use the faders. Here, I'll fool around with the bass, for instance, and that can be applied right in here, and you'll hear what that does. If I pull the space back, it drops way back. And then if I push it forward, it jumps way forward. So for a while now, I've been advising people not to do fader moves, and people have done things as extreme as setting up entire subchannels. For instance, here's the thing that you can do. If you've got your guitars, for instance, here, I'm just thinking about how this is going to work. Actually, I think that is how it works. If you've got console on your guitar submix, and let's just solo a couple of these guys and see what we get. Maybe center them. We've got console going through here. We've applied it twice. Let's not do that. Then if I'm altering this, it's going to go into the top of this bank. You see, this is different from if you're putting it, because what console does, it's a distortion and anti-distortion chain that are designed to cancel each other out. So when you're going into console extra hot, all you're doing is saturating stuff more than it would normally be, and you're not spiking out the output quite as much as you might otherwise do. I've given it 6 whole dB, which is quite a lot, but it's not really doing as much as you would think. Now, if I was to turn console on and turn it off here, that's getting a lot jumpier. It's poking out harder. I can magnify that even more by doing it with all of the guitars at once. So we'll select them. And this ought to demonstrate what I'm talking about pretty well. Now if I push this way up, we're peaking really hot. In fact, we're probably clipping, almost certainly clipping. And that's pretty aggressive sounding. But if we remove all of these console plugins in here, people are doing this as a way of doing their gain staging and being able to use the faders while still using console the way it was designed. We've got this going into the submix here. You can see it's still pretty hot, but it's not spiking out anywhere near as loud as the other one was. And that's because these are all feeding into a aux, and console is on the aux, so it's as if these faders are, it's as if this console is post-fader, because literally it is. It's running into a bus, and the bus is going to an aux, and console is on the aux, and the aux is going to the stereo out. Now that's getting a little complicated, perhaps a little overcomplicated. And what I've learned in even just doing this video is that I'm not sure that's necessary to do. I mean, if you have the option, for instance in Reaper I think can do this, of placing plugins post-fader, you want to place Console3 channel post-fader if you can. But what you'll also find is that if you've got a mix set up in console and you're combining things and stuff, and you're doing stuff like, for instance, taking this farfisa that's buried in the back and you want to crank it right up, there's no reason you can't. Well, that's not actually a lot of help because you can't hear it. Let's do it with the drums. there's no reason you can't simply use the faders, which are being done inside console, and then do your boosting of things and goosing of volume or cutting it back. For what you'll really want is for stuff to be basically unity gain when not being manipulated. And that's really all you're going to need, is if stuff is basically where it's supposed to be, it should be at unity gain. Console's designed to work that way. I mean, if everything was boosted, what you get is an overly spiky thing. I've got 80 clip-ons, so that's going to keep it from clipping and overloading, so I can demonstrate that for you. Here's all the tracks. Here's all the tracks pulled way back, and that sounds much smaller. And then I'll boost them. Over spiky. You don't want to run everything too hot into the console bus. It will break the way the thing is designed to sound reasonably plausible, and it doesn't really want to sit in that area, but there's no reason you can't take an individual item, bass or something, and manipulate it using the fader. You can do stuff like that, and it's just fine. Yes, it's designed to sit post-fader, but it's really fairly flexible. It works out pretty well for the stuff that you might want to do. So, I've put a lot of work into all of this. This has been, and not only that, when this goes out, it's going to go out to a lot of people absolutely free, because anybody who's bought previous versions of Console gets this newest version free. I've always done that. I have no intention of changing now. It's going to cost me a lot of money because a lot of people bought Console. But my hope is that a lot more people will go out and buy Console now that I've demonstrated it, and now that I have a apparently incredibly long YouTube video showing how it works. I mean, hopefully that will help things move along and stuff, and this is what you could call a pretty well tested and proven plugin, in that it was pretty much the big thing that I did when it came out. It was a big success. It can continue to be a success for you even in this newest version, or especially in this newest version, because I've heightened the tonality of it. I can do even a little quick demonstration of what it's like compared with the very first console. Actually, no, I don't even have the very first console. I have its immediate predecessor. Its immediate predecessor is pretty good. It was not what you would call a bad sounding plugin. It sounded like this. Now let's quickly switch it over to Console 3. Here's the difference between what's out there now and what is coming out. Listen to the top end especially. A lot more space in there, a lot more dimensionality. I hope you like Console. I hope I sell some more of these. It's been a lot of work trying to develop it, because the very first one that came out was pretty good on its own. You know, it's a very simple plugin, but sometimes, as I've learned with my most recent work, developing the simple stuff and really getting it right can be tricky. But I think I've made a jump in the quality level. I mean, go back a minute or so and listen to what the comparison was just then. What can I say? I hope you like it. Thanks for listening.